Hi, it's Dr. Greg Ellis again. Today I want to talk about the role that exercise plays in weight control. There are many people arguing that exercise has no value to helping people control their weight and even lose their weight. And we really need to address that question. Now, recently, this author, Gary Taubes, wrote a book called Why We Get Fat. And it is his postulate that exercise has no role in weight control whatsoever. And he does what I call a lot of speculating as to why that is true. Now, I have a technique that I use in my work. I call putting it to the numbers. So whenever we can generate some actual numbers, get a real handle on what's going on, then we're not speculating anymore. And I think there's a lot of speculation happening there. So we're going to come back and look at our doubly labeled water technique, which is a method to measure the amount of calories you burn over several weeks' time. Now, your metabolism is made up of two parts. Your resting metabolic rate, how many calories you burn just sitting, doing nothing, and then the amount of calories that you burn through physical activity. The total of these two is called the total daily energy expenditure. So you measure the resting metabolic rate by measuring someone's oxygen consumption. And now with the doubly labeled water technique, we can figure out exactly how many calories people are burning by physically moving. So most people who just get up every day and go to work and do whatever they do and don't do any structured exercise program, through their movement they burn about 55% more calories than their resting metabolic rate. So let's assume that your resting metabolic rate is 2,000 calories a day. And that's a little bit big. You're a bigger person you would be if that were the case. So 2,000 calories a day that's it. That's what we compare. Now, you will burn 55% more of that during the course of the day. So what did doubly labeled water teach us about the value of exercise? That if you do that and your metabolic system and your total daily energy expenditure is 1.55 times your resting metabolic rate, that you will not benefit for weight control from that number of calories. In the studies they've done, they found out that you have to be at 1.75 times. So you can do the math, and you can get an estimate on my website of what your resting metabolic rate is. In fact, I make the calculations for you. I give you multiples of your resting metabolic rate so you can see exactly what you have to do. We also know that people who burn 2 times the resting metabolic rate never have a weight control problem. It's just their expenditure is so great. Now, one of the arguments that Gary Taubes makes, and I'm not picking on Gary Taubes, I just don't want you guys to be misinformed, and I think much of what he's saying on several of his main topics is misinformation, and I don't think he has thought this out as well as he should. Gary's always interested in talking about using hard science. There's nothing more hard science than doubly labeled water. So, and I'm not sure he knows about that. So his argument was that the obesity epidemic occurred despite the fact that people were given advice to exercise more and eat less. And if that had happened, then we wouldn't have an obesity epidemic. The issue is, I don't think people followed that advice. I don't think they exercised more, and they certainly ate more. When you look at the USDA data on this, the 1970, the average consumption of calories per day was 2,168. By 2005, it was up 24% to 2,704. So obviously people did not eat less. They actually ate a lot more, 24% more. It's going to be really hard to control your weight when you're doing that. And I also don't believe people exercise more. Now, I've been in the health club business my whole life. I opened my first Nautilus gym when I was 25 years old. And I know that people are not working out. Only a handful of people are working out. And you have today a lot of younger people who are getting involved in these very aggressive physical training programs. But they represent a very small minority. They're a fringe group, and they're working out very, very hard and long, and they're all lean. So I dispute the idea that more people were doing more exercise. And Gary argues that there was a fitness explosion and cites an article written by someone in the New York Times. Now, okay, journalists get really excited about things, and I think in that case that they just made it up. They don't know this industry, they don't know the data. And another argument Gary poses is the tremendous growth in revenues of health clubs. Well, less than 15% of the population belongs to a health club. So they're paying their monthly dues, and guess what? They're not going. They don't go there. And I learned this back in college when I was in Pittsburgh in the late 60s. All the spas, like the European Health Spa, they sell these contract memberships to people because they know they will not use the facility. And they get them on a month-by-month payment, and they extract the money from their bank account every month. They love it. And the people don't care. They just keep paying. They don't change anything. So I would argue against all that. Now, the next point is that there is this explosion in the exercise, and as I say, there wasn't. And one of his main arguments is that exercise will just increase our appetite. Well, there's really no evidence to support that position. There's none. And it's simply not true. Now, Gary is a proponent of the low-carb diet, as I am as well. And he argues that people should follow the low-carb diet, and I do too. I wrote all this up in my 2002 book. If you consume a low-carb diet, your appetite will just go away. So if you're following that diet, you certainly don't have to worry about your appetite getting increased, because it won't. It will get less. So that's the important thing to remember on that. The other argument I make to prove that exercise is of value is the military. So let's look at the military. A friend of mine was a Marine. He said guys who come in and they're obese do not go out obese. They go out lean. And they'll have a drill sergeant follow you in the dining hall. And he'll say, just one scoop of that. No, none of that. And they control everything these guys put in their body. And of course, they're moving all day long. They're exercising like crazy. And they're lean, and they stay lean. They're not fat. So the other argument that Gary makes is that carbohydrates make us fat. Well, we all know that the primary diet for athletes that has been recommended for the last 40 years is one that is high in carbohydrate, because everybody believes that carbohydrates are the primary fuel of the body. And they aren't. Fat is. But still, athletes consume a high-carb diet. And then those recommendations have spilled over into the general public, and they typically follow the same thing. Now, the experts within the military who have set up the guidelines for the dietary intake and the diet composition of soldiers has these people eating between 55 and 65% of their calories as carbohydrates. So if carbohydrates are the sole influence that determine whether or not we are fat, then the soldiers certainly don't display that. So I think that certainly gives a lot of evidence to the idea that the carbohydrates are not solely responsible for getting fat, and that the amount of exercise we do is critical. Now that's it, the amount of exercise we do. You may not want to do as much as you need to do, because it takes about 70 or 80 minutes a day of moderate physical activity to help control your weight. That's a fact we uncovered with the doubly labeled water study. And for my money, most people aren't exercising anyway, so to get that amount of time in is just going to be difficult. But that doesn't mean that exercise doesn't help. Doesn't mean that exercise won't help people control their weight and lose weight. It will, but you have to do enough. That's a critical point. So I dispute Gary's position. I think it's incorrect, and I think it's a source of misinformation to tell you that, and to tell you that all it will do is increase your appetite. And that's in the face of the fact that he's telling you later on in the book, when he talks about carbohydrates causing us to become fat, where he says that we know that eating a low-carb diet will reduce your hunger. So we need to stay away from that idea. So that's my point of view on the value of exercise in weight control. I'm Dr. Greg Ellis, and we'll catch up with you next time.